25 minutes on different types of stimulation, but now using this stim source and stim target. And then we're also quickly going to see how to record LFPs and plot LFPs and CSVs. So I just shared this Google Colab, which has basically tutorial 6 copied here, tutorial 6 from the website. Right here, adding stimulation to the network. And we're gonna go over, so this is called tutorial NetPyNE Stim. And you have the link in general if you wanna make a copy. So I'm gonna go over it. We start again with the basics, creating a netparams object. And we define a simple type of cell. Again, one compartment, pyramidal cell. Notice the structure of this one is, using these single lines to define all the parameters, which depends on who you talk to, they're preferred or not. Here we have 2 populations. They're both of the cell type pyramidal, 20 cells on each, Hodgkin-Huxley. You don't really need this. This is legacy code. I'm just going to remove this. And then we have a synapse, typical excitatory synapse. So the interesting part comes here, and we've already seen some of these. So these are the 4 classical types of stimulation that you have in neuron. The current clamp, the voltage clamp, which we saw also in one of the neuron tutorials, I believe. This artificial synapse, the alpha synapse, which provides synaptic stimulation to the cells without requiring a presynaptic cell, and the net stim, which we have also seen. So here we use this format, the stim source params and stim target params, which, as I was mentioning before, means that you essentially provide one copy of each of these stimulus sources for each of the target cells. So if you have, you create an eye clamp, current clamp, you will create, and you have 10 target cells, you will create 10 different current clamps, one for each cell. If you create a net stim stimulator, then you will create 10 different stimulators, 10 different net stims for each of the target cells. The spike times of the net stims will be different because they are dependent not only on the seed of that net stim, but also on the global ID of the target cell. So that's the way we ensure that they don't all receive the same spike times. And let's just have a bit of a look at the different parameters that you can use for each one. So maybe it helps if we use this format. Okay. So for the current clamp, we have the typical delay duration, and notice that we can also use this kind of mathematical expressions to define some of the parameters, like the amplitude here. So you can have an amplitude that is random between 0.5 and 0.4 and 0.5. So the different target cells will receive different current injections. For the voltage clamp, you have basically the parameters that are set on the described on the documentation in Neuron. This duration and amplitude, you require a vector or an array of 3 elements, which indicates the 3 times at which these voltages are set. And then you have a bunch of other parameters for the recording electrode. And the alpha synapse, you have these 4 parameters. The type, which is alpha synapse, the onset, so at what time does it start? And again, you can use mathematical expressions using these string-based functions that we call, between 300 and 600 milliseconds. The time constant is 5. The Gmax, I don't know what it was, I just deleted it. Oh, okay, sorry. The Gmax depends on the conductance of the synapse. We have made it depend on the postsynaptic cell normalized cortical depth. So what do you guys think this is gonna do? What effect this is gonna have on the cells that it targets?
The deeper the layer, the stronger the synapse?
Correct. Yes. So the deeper the cell, the stronger the conductance of that synapse is going to be. So, okay, very good. And then the last type is the nesting, which we have seen. Again, we have this string-based function to define the interval. Notice that for nestings, you can either use rate as a fine rate or the inverse, which is the interval. They are interchangeable, and you can use one or the other. If you include both, the rate takes precedence. Okay, and then we have, so now at this point we have only created these sort of abstract sources, but they don't really exist yet because we haven't connected them to any cells. So unless we connect them to cells, they're not going to be created. And to connect them to cells is where we use these stim target params. So for the first input, which was the current clamp, notice that basically we just require, well, specifying the source, which is the current clamp, and then specifying the section and the location. So at which point are we going to add this point process, which is the current clamp, and the conditions of the cells where we want to provide this current clamp. So in this case, we are saying it's in population, the sensory population, all the cells in the range 0 to 15. So within that population, the first 15 cells. For the second example here, which is the voltage clamp, it's very similar. It's a point process, so we just have to specify the section and the location, and then the conditions of the cells. In this case, it's a sort of additive condition where you have all cells of population S that are within 0 and 0.5 of the normalized cortical depth. So if you have 1000 micrometers is your size of your network in the Y dimension, the cortical depth, then only the ones that are between 0 and 500 micrometers will receive this volume issue. Is anyone having a volume issue? Anyone else?
No.
Okay. Jessica says you can hear. So I think, Jessica, it's on your side because I believe the rest are hearing me. And I think there's another question. For Gmax equal post Y norm, we didn't specify cell positions in space, so will they just have random position assignments after making the cells? Can we view the cells positions? Yes and yes. And so you can see, so by default, NetPyNE has a size of network, and you can check that if you do what? NetParams size X, size Y, size Z. Okay, so by default, it's a cube of 100 micrometers dimension on each side, and all the cells will be located randomly within that cube. You can change this, and then you can have like a more column-based. You can actually change the shape also, and I think that is in shape cuboid. So that is currently a cuboid, but you can say spheric or something like that. I don't think it's spheric is the word. Let me just check. Cylinder or ellipsoid. So you can have a cylinder. If you want to have a column, you can change this to cylinder. And then they will be slightly different distributed. So then the X and Y X and Z dimensions become the diameters of the cube, of the cylinder. And yes, you can check the locations, the positions after it's been created. And we're gonna see a bit of that more after lunch. Let me just check the agenda. Yes, after lunch, but I can quickly show you the syntax for that. Sim, which is this parent object in NetPyNE. Net contains the network. Cells contains the list of cells. We go to cell 0 and we say, show me the tags, which are like kind of the properties of the cell. And here you have the X, Y, and Z locations. You can ask for a specific one if you want. And that is the location of the cell. Okay. Okay, so we had these 4 stimuli. Input 2, which was, yes, the voltage clamp, and we had some conditions. So let's move to the next one, which is the alpha synapse. The alpha synapse, again, is simply a current point process. So we just provide the section and the location where we want to insert it, and the conditions of the cells that we want to target. And finally, we have the NetStim, which we have already seen before. And this one is slightly different because, as we've seen, this really is a kind of artificial cell. So apart from the target section and location, we really are creating connections here. So we have a NetStim and we are connecting it to the target cells. And for that, we're using a netcon. So that's NetPyNE is going to internally create all these netcons. And in this case, you need to specify the weight and the delay of that connections. But it's still going to be one-to-one. So NetPyNE is going to create one NetStim, one netcon, and connect it to each cell. You can also specify the conditions of the target cells using a combination of features. So, any questions?
Yes, in this case, when you use a NetStim as a Steam target, you don't have to specify the synaptic mechanism, right?
You do have, yes. It's not here because by default NetPyNE will use whatever mechanism is first in the list, but you can specify. I think it's X. So you need to specify it because it's essentially a normal connection. So you need to use one of these synapses to connect them.
If you don't, what is there a default?
If you don't, it takes the first one from the list of synaptic mechanisms. It will give a warning, I believe, or maybe only if you have the verbose flag set on. So there is a simconfig verbose here. So if this is set to true, it will say, hey, you forgot to specify the synapse mechanism for these connections. I'm using the default.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you explain the difference between the artificial synapse or the alpha synapse and NetStim?
Yes, so the alpha synapse is essentially what we call a point process. So it's like a current clamp that you inject or provide at a specific location of the cell, and it changes. It's like if you open channels. So you have a synapse, a synaptic receptor, and the channels open with whatever maximum conductance you specify here. And the NetStim is sort of a separate object apart from the cell that generates spikes at a specific rate, 10 hertz or whatever, and then we connect that NetStim with the cell using a netcon and a synapse, like if you had like a normal connection between cells. So the alpha synapse is just the postsynaptic receptor, and a NetStim is the spike generator plus the netcon plus the synapse.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, and so if we run the model, what we get is this weird thing. And we can have a look at what's going on. So just check again. So let's check the first input is this current clamp at 300 milliseconds on the S population. So let's see if we can find that one. So that's right here. See 300 milliseconds. The S population is the blue one, and you get due to this current injection, you get the spikes in the cells. The next one is a voltage clamp with 3 different voltages between 0 and 200 milliseconds, minus 60, minus 30, and 40. So we should see the effect of those at the beginning, and that is for population sensory, only half of them. So this is what we are seeing here, I believe. So once you change the voltage to some value that crosses the threshold, like minus 30 or minus 40, the cells are spiking here at the beginning. And you see only a bunch of the cells spike because we are only targeting the ones in the upper half. We're saying the condition is 0.0.5, 0 to 0.5 of the cortical depth. So only a bunch of cells are firing. And because they're not ordered here by depth, you just see them in a random position. We could plot the raster by depth, order by, I think this is Y. Okay, and now you see only the bottom half here. Actually, let me make it inverse so it makes more sense. Order inverse. Okay, so now you see, now they're ordered by cortical depth. So due to this voltage clamp at the beginning, only the ones at the top are a spike, and only some of them, and I'm not sure exactly why only some of them are triggered by this voltage clamp. Let me see. Population S. So in theory, they're all receiving the same. At 50 milliseconds, they're changing the voltage to minus 30. So maybe it's some random effect that only some of them get triggered. I'm not sure exactly, to be honest. Okay, and then the next one is this alpha synapse, which affects which population? This M population, the motor population, and only a specific list of cells in the motor population. And it starts at between 300 and 600 milliseconds. Some of the M population cells are going to receive an alpha synapse with a conductance that depends on depth. So it's quite a complex stimulation. Let's see if we can figure out where this is. So this is the motor population between 300, between here and 600. Okay, so you see, I'm not sure if you can actually see it, but you see a couple of cells spiking in the motor population. So this here would be due to the alpha synapse. And in theory, you should see more in the lower side because it depends on the depth. So maybe.
So can I ask you just how do you, if you wanted to change the plot to see it instead of order of GID in order of Y norm depth?
Yes, that is what we did. So.
Oh, they're in order of Y norm depth. Ah, yeah.
Yes, now they are, yes. Because I changed this to order by Y. So the effect is not very strong. I'm gonna remove this cell list so that it applies to all of them, and we can see the effect a bit more clearly. And I'm gonna increase maybe the alpha synapse conductance here. So I'm gonna say 2 times this. or 4 times this. Let's see what we get. No. Okay, so we still see some cells, but I don't really see the effect of this Y norm being stronger here at the bottom. We should see more of these cells here in the bottom really firing, but because it's a bit, random as well, we might not be seeing it. In any case, we have 3 minutes to the talk, so we should all start logging into the YouTube channel. So as I mentioned, we're going to see this talk by Nima Mesgarani. I put here some nice links from his profile and a couple of articles he has published recently in Scientific American. Well, they've published on his work and on New Scientist. So if you all guys want to join the YouTube channel, I think they're going to be projecting there in real time.